You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. So there are a lot of different dragon shouts in Skyrim. Specifically, there are more than 20 shouts with a wide range of abilities. Some of these boost aspects of your character's stats, some may even debuff enemies, some can even affect the progression of time, while others can be used to distract alerted enemies. Today, I will be going over what I think are some of the best dragon shouts in Skyrim Remastered. A couple quick things before we start though. You're going to typically find the best dragon shouts for your character may depend on your build. So for example, something like Throw Voice will be most useful on a thief or a stealth type character. So that should be something that you consider for when you're choosing a dragon shout. You may not actually want Throw Voice if you have a two-handed warrior, much like you wouldn't want Elemental Fury if you plan on using enchanted weapons. Just remember that these are dragon shouts that I think are among some of the best. You may find other dragon shouts are better for your playstyle, but without further ado, these are the top 10 best dragon shouts in Skyrim Remastered. Let's go. Number 10, Ice Form. So Ice Form is sort of like the paralysis effect in Skyrim. The difference is that Ice Form's effects typically last longer, however you can't actually attack an enemy with melee attacks as this will shatter the ice, thereby canceling the effect. You'll also find that Ice Form just doesn't work on some enemy types, and these generally tend to be much larger enemy types like dragons or mammoths. That said, Ice Form does work up against giants, so that is a good positive of the Ice Form shout. I should also probably mention that Ice Form effects can be replicated with Frost Breath's Dragon Frost ability, which also freezes an enemy in place and won't break after one hit. The only issue with this is that the Dragonborn Frost ability requires the Dragonborn DLC, and you may end up acquiring one of the 3 other abilities from the Gardener of Men side quest mission. It's ultimately going to depend on whether you prefer Frost Breath to Fire Breath or Unrelenting Force. This is a really useful shout to control the tide of combat, especially for early level characters. You can freeze one enemy long enough to take out his friends, and then come back and take him out. While the effects I think could be better, Ice Form's duration is really nice. Number 9, Slow Time. As you might guess, Slow Time pretty much does what it says, it slows time. Now, while the player is also slowed down somewhat while using the shout, you'll ultimately find that you're still moving quite a bit faster than the enemies you end up fighting. You can use slow time during combat to make it easier to escape dangerous situations, since it makes enemy attacks much easier to avoid or dodge. A stealth player could presumably use slow time to quickly sneak attack and kill enemies. What's also cool to mention is that both the stability perk from Alteration as well as the Fortify Alteration potion can boost the duration of the slow time effect. So you'll find that slow time works even better if you have sufficient skill in alchemy and alteration, as well as having the resources to make your Fortify Alteration potions. You may also find that slow time is really useful for enchanting and smithing items. If you decide to drink Fortify Enchanting or Smithing potions, you can make the effects last twice as long with the slow time shout. Ultimately, slow time is a really good shout, and I think you should keep an eye out for it. Number 8, Soul Tear. This shout has a lot of great effects. However, I think you're going to find that its abilities are best used on some of the weaker enemies in the game, as opposed to some of the stronger enemies that have a lot of health. Soul Tear allows the player to not only deal damage to an enemy, but you also cast Soul Trap on that enemy, so when they die, it consumes or fills a soul gem. Plus, if the shout kills the enemy in question, they are revived for about 60 seconds, and they will fight for you. Now, while I've heard you can get this ability to work on giants, these enemies usually have high enough health to where Soul Tear doesn't instantly kill them. Thus, it doesn't revive them. Even still, Soul Tear is quite powerful early on in the game. The shout itself deals a significant amount of damage to enemies, which can be quite impressive, assuming your weapons aren't dealing anywhere near that much early on. Plus, the ability to cast Soul Trap and revive the dead is quite useful as well. Now, while I think there are better shouts out there, Soul Tear is pretty good and is definitely recommended. Number 7, Become Ethereal. This shout is interesting in the sense that it doesn't really apply any offensive capabilities to the player. What is also weird is that enemies can still see you while the effects are active. However, they aren't able to deal damage to you, and you can't deal damage to them either. You can also use this shout to run away from enemies without fear of getting killed in the process. Running while Become Ethereal is active doesn't drain your stamina bar, so you can actually run a little longer than you would be able to normally. However, if you cast a spell or deal damage with a melee attack, Become Ethereal's effect is lost. You'll also find that Become Ethereal has some other interesting uses. You can negate all fall damage, making it perfect for descending from high areas. You will also avoid all traps, and you can trick mages into using all of their magicka, making them much easier to kill. Ultimately, if you decide to get Become Ethereal, you should visit Paarthurnax and meditate on Become Ethereal's words of power. Number 6. Elemental and Battle Fury. So both of these shouts are fairly similar. Elemental Fury works on the player, while Battle Fury works on NPCs that are allied to the Dragonborn. As you might expect though, both of these shouts' effects don't work if the player or allied NPCs are wielding enchanted weapons. Fortunately, most friendly or allied NPCs won't have enchanted weapons, though your followers might depending on how you decided to equip them. What this shout ultimately does is greatly increases your attack speed with melee weapons and bows that don't contain enchantments. With all three words, Elemental Fury will double the player's attack speed, making dual-wielding weapon strategies much more powerful. And as you can probably imagine, dual-wield power attacks with Elemental Fury active, especially with daggers, would greatly increase your damage per second to insane levels. Really, your biggest drawback here is that you can't use the shout with enchanted weapons. So if you rely on things like Absorb Health, obviously Elemental Fury is going to be useless to you. Even still, I actually really like this shout. It's certainly worth experimenting with, and it might be good early on when you're not using quite as many enchanted weapons. Number 5. Dragonrend. This shout is acquired during Skyrim's main questline. If you plan on fighting a lot of dragons throughout Skyrim, this shout is absolutely essential as it forces dragons to land regardless of how much health they may have. Now, normally you would need to have a dragon reach about 50% health in order to get it to land, and assuming you didn't have Dragonrend, this means you would need some kind of ranged attack to deal enough damage to get that dragon to land. You can get Dragonrend during the Alduin's Bane quest. Otherwise, there's not really a whole lot else to say about this shout, as it is pretty simple in function. All you really do is you see the dragon, you shout at the dragon then lands, and then you kill the dragon. If you play far enough into the main quest, you're gonna get Dragonrend for sure. Number 4. Unrelenting Force. Good old Fus Ro Dah. I'd say that Skyrim's first shout is probably one of the most fun shouts to use in the game, and it's probably going to be one of the first ones that you level up completely. Now, for the uninitiated, Unrelenting Force is essentially a shout that can either stagger enemies or send them flying backwards. You'll find that Unrelenting Force is great for achieving crowd control if you're getting swarmed by tough enemies. And what's also nice is that if you're close to a cliff or some kind of high ledge or area, you can use Unrelenting Force to knock an enemy off a ledge. And if you're high enough, the resulting fall will instantly kill that enemy. Now, early on, Unrelenting Force is really useful up against tough enemies like giants. Later on in Skyrim, and assuming you decide to play through some of the Dragonborn DLC, you can play through a side quest called the Gardener of Man. And upon completion, you can acquire the Dragonborn Force ability, which will make Unrelenting Force deal more damage to enemies. The best part is that you also keep Unrelenting Force's knockback and stagger effects on top of this improved damage. Now, just like Become Ethereal, it's also recommended that you meditate on Fus Ro Dah with Paarthurnax when the option becomes available to you. That way you can get the Force Without Effort ability, which allows you to stagger enemies easier with an uncharged version of Unrelenting Force. Number 3. Throw Voice. So Throw Voice is a shout that you're going to find is best used by stealth archers or stealth characters in general. What it does is makes the Dragonborn's voice sound like it's coming from somewhere else other than where the player character is located. This makes it easy to trick enemies into going right where you want them to, so you can perform a stealth kill on them, whether that's with a ranged or melee weapon. What's also great about this shout is that it gains a shorter recharge time as you charge up the shout. And the max level version of Throw Voice recharges 6 times faster than the base or uncharged version of Throw Voice. You'll also be happy to know that Throw Voice benefits from the Quiet Casting perk from the Illusion skill tree, making you much more difficult to detect. What's also nice is that all of the rune words for Throw Voice are acquired in the same place. While Croesus is certainly difficult to kill, once you've obtained Throw Voice, I think you'll find that the struggle was certainly worth it. If you're playing a stealth build, Throw Voice is essential, or at the very least, it makes things easier. Number 2, Marked for Death. Now, Marked for Death is a shout that gradually decreases the armor rating and health of an affected enemy. As you might guess, this makes enemies more vulnerable to physical damage. It's actually possible to get this effect to stack on enemies, and not only that, but if you don't have the unofficial patch for Skyrim installed, the effects of Marked for Death are permanent. So enemies can respawn in the world, and they can still be under Marked for Death's effects. So you could even use Marked for Death again and get even more of a debuff. Depending on the power or charge of the shout that you cast, the amount of armor rating and health lowered per second will increase. Now, from my experience, the health drain from Marked for Death isn't insanely strong or even especially useful. On the flip side, the armor rating reduction per second is quite nice. It's possible to lower an enemy's armor rating below 0, which allows you to deal more physical damage than you otherwise might be able to. Now, Marked for Death is a great shout, especially if you play Skyrim without the unofficial Skyrim patch mod, as it's going to allow you to make certain enemies permanently weaker. Number 1, Dragon Aspect. Dragon Aspect is a fairly unique shout. Unlike other shouts in Skyrim, Dragon Aspect can only be used once per day and also allows the player to use other shouts while its effects are active. Now, Dragon Aspect's effects vary depending on the strength of the shout and how many parts of the Thume you have. If you have all 3 of the words, Dragon Aspect gives you 25% more damage with power attacks, a significant numerical increase in your armor rating, 25% boost to fire and frost resistance, and it also reduces the amount of time it takes for shouts to recharge. And really, the best way to think of Dragon Aspect is that it's sort of a cross between a dragon shout and a unique racial power. It provides significant bonuses once a day. However, what's exceptional is that Dragon Aspect's effects last 6 minutes of playtime. You also get a temporary Ancient Dragonborn companion to assist you in battle if you lose more than half of your health. I found this is mostly useful as a distraction rather than as a companion that does all of the fighting for you. Plus, this companion will only remain active as long as Dragon Aspect is active, and as long as the player doesn't go above half health. Once you do go above half health, the Dragonborn companion disappears. This is a nice shout, and I think you'll ultimately find that the increased power attack damage, along with the shout recharge reduction, is the most useful feature. Plus, it looks pretty cool too. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.